again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hi there, welcome to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and I will be your host for today's episode. With me today is author Christy Sauro Jr. Chris is a former Marine Corps sergeant, was a member of the Twins Platoon. He served in Vietnam from 1967 to 1969. After being honorably discharged in 1970, he earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of Minnesota and another bachelor's degree in technology from Northwest Missouri State University. He had a successful career as an insurance agent for Country Financial and retired after 47 years. He is here to discuss his latest book, The Legacy of the Twins Platoon. Hi, Chris. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. It's nice to meet you. So can you tell us about your latest published book?
Well, this latest book is actually an extension of the first book that was published in 2006 called The Twins Platoon.
Okay.
And this book, I made it so that people would not have to buy two books to, read the full story of the Twins Platoon.
Okay.
So everything that was in the first book, was in the second book, plus a whole lot more. And the timeline on the legacy of the Twins Platoon goes to the present. So it's kind of a real unique look at American history because when the reader reads the book, it follows those people that served in the service in the Twins Platoon, follows them and their families from the time they were young teenagers all the way to their death. Many of them have passed away now as old men. And so it's kind of unique that way. It's people often think of, when people are in service, they often think of them as like maybe a 3-4 year period in time. But in the book, they'll read how that war affected the people and the guys that served in it and their families for their entire life. It had effect on them all the way to the day they died, and people get to read about that. And it might be kind of enlightening, I think. So
yeah, I like that aspect of your book. It kind of gives more perspective onto the lives and what these people went through and how when they came back, how it deeply affected them, and mention the families too. I think that's great. How many people's stories did you include in your book?
Actually, there's probably about roughly 12, 13 different individuals and their families. But the book gets in, because it's nonfiction, the story kind of evolves where there's so many people that are written about in the book. It's not only the members of the Twins Platoon, but it also gets into the people that they served with. It gets into all the different branches of service, because so much of their experiences overlapped, especially in combat. The Army, Navy, Air Force, they were all involved and worked together, and people get to read about that in the book. So the number of people involved is pretty extensive. And I like that it has it's not the story about one person, so it really gives the reader a real wide view of what went on in that war, because it's involves many different occupations, helicopters, artillery, tanks, infantrymen, the whole gamut of occupations, military occupations. So
And so how did you approach interviewing, I guess, all the members of the Twins Platoons and everyone involved? How did that process start?
Well, I did my first interview actually in 1990.
Wow.
And it was just a matter of tracking people down and getting in touch with them and then interviewing them. And they're, like I say, interviewed not only the the Twins Platoon members themselves, but their families, their parents, their sisters, their brothers, their girlfriends. And one of the interesting things about when I went out and interviewed the Twins Platoon members was that, with the exception of two guys, Carter and Circle, who were neighbors, they ended up being neighbors. When I started the interviews in 1990, this is many years after they served in Vietnam, which was during, the late 60s and early 70s. I was the first person they had talked to about their Vietnam experiences.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was in every case. I mean, so that was kind of interesting. And people can read about that in the book too. And they'll get some insights into why I think people in the military don't talk about their service. And it might be for reasons that they don't think it might be for something different that might surprise them. So.
And so what inspired you to write this book and publish it for the world to learn about?
Well, it started in about 1986. The idea came to me to write a book about what happened to the Twins Platoon. But when I thought about it, it was like, how do you begin to do that? How do you write I've never written a book before. How do I write a book about 150 people about the Vietnam War? And so I dismissed the idea, but it wouldn't go away. And over the next 4 years, the idea just evolved into what I would say is like a calling.
Yeah.
Just something that I knew I needed to do. And so I set out and started it in 1990.
Wow. And so how was it, the idea of writing a book? Did you know at the time how extensive it would be, or was it ever overwhelming, especially with like the interviewing process, or did you like the interviewing process or the writing more?
It was it really was a bit overwhelming. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
the first day that I started, I got in front of a computer. I think it took me 3 days to come up with the first sentence because it was like, where do you begin?
Right, yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a very laborsome process because I had to track down people. And also in the book, I wanted people to know the bigger picture. I mean, what was going on in our country, the history behind it. So I wanted it to be where you don't just read about one person's experience, you actually read about how this war affected our entire country, how it changed our country, how our country, it divided our country. And then because the new book now goes to the present, especially young people, I think they'll get a chance to read about how that war divided our country, how our servicemen were treated back then, and then how things changed over time and how the country reunited. So there's just a lot of information in it that covers a lot of different things.
And so, specifically about your book, the story, the story begins in a very unique way. So the Marine recruits being sworn in at a Minnesota Twins baseball game, right?
Right.
So,
Yes.
so how did that partnership between the Twins and the Marines come about?
I'm not sure how exactly it came about. I think it was like a promotional thing for both the Marine Corps and the Twins baseball organization.
Yeah.
That organization is very, very pro-military and has always supported, the military. And so I think it's a way of honoring our troops. And the Marine Corps, I think too, it was a good promotion for them because back then the war was starting to escalate and our country needed a lot of people to serve in the military. And in fact, they needed so many, then they instituted the draft and started to draft people into the military.
And so, can you describe what that day was like from the ceremony at the stadium and then to boarding the plane for San Diego?
Sure. Well, it was unique for all of us. Well, I think number one, back then, I think without exception, none of us had ever even flown in a plane. Back then, that was kind of expensive, and I'd say the vast majority of us came from middle-class families. So I don't even think our parents had flown in planes. So that was kind of exciting to know you're going to get on a plane. Very exciting to think you're going to be out on a baseball field in front of a bunch of people. And then, of course, when they announced, who we were, what we were doing there, we got a standing, a lot of cheers from the crowd. And, a lot of us were 17. I was 17. A lot of us were 17, 18. So this was very unique. We'd never had anything. It was very exciting, very, very memorable. So.
And so many of these men would soon find themselves in some of the most dangerous areas of Vietnam, such as Hue City and others. What were some of the defining moments for the Twins Platoon during the war?
Well, there was I should mention the book is divided into 3 parts. So the first part, is about the swearing in and training, which is a real eye opener. And then, but the overseas to Vietnam, it just so happened that, 90% of us went to Vietnam. And we got there in December of 67. And so we're all there through 1968, which was, probably the most extensive period in the war in terms of how many battles were going on, major battles. So the Twins Platoon ended up fighting in, Tet of 1968, Way City, Khe Sanh, the Battle of Dai Do. All the major battles, pretty much Marine Corps battles, that is, they were participated in. And when people read about it, again, they get to see how it was for the guys that were in the infantry, the guys that were in the artillery, the tanks, logistics, helicopters. So they get to read about it. And there's a lot of extensive combat in the book in the middle section. So,
What you mentioned, one part is about training. What was the training process like? You said it was a little overwhelming or extensive.
Well,
Eye-opening, you said.
Well, the Marine Corps training, this is, prior to, it changed after Vietnam, the Marine Corps training, but through all the, like, World War I, World War II, Korea, and in the Vietnam era, the Marine Corps boot camp was, by all terms, what people would think of today as being very brutal and sadistic. And so people get to read about it. And on this book, The Legacy of the Twins Platoon, I, had a lot of military people also edit it to make sure it was, there was no mistakes, no errors in it from a factual standpoint. And one of the people that edited it was, he served during the Korean War and said boot camp was the same way back then. But people get to read about it. And like I said, it was very abusive. Guys got knocked around, and people get to read about that. So, and something I might add too, as brutal as it sounds, what I did in the book, I only, when I interviewed everybody, I only put those stories in the boot camp when other people independently shared the same story. And I also remembered the event. So that way I knew everything was accurate, because we had 3 people all recounting or remembering the exact same incident. And then the other thing that I did was I didn't put in the most outrageous things that happened in boot camp. I tried to put in what was just your normal day-to-day routine in boot camp and what the drill instructors did to the recruits and us. And like I say, a lot of people I hear a lot of feedback from people when they read that, they're kind of shocked.
Yeah.
So, and then one last thing I might add about that, as brutal as it was, there wasn't anybody that regretted it. I mean, it was the kind of thing nobody regretted having to go through boot camp, except for maybe one fellow named Bain, which they'll read about.
Mm.
And he ended up, well, I won't go into it, but a congressional investigation resulted into boot camp due to Private Bain. But people get to read about that in the book.
In the book, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, things like, boot camp and training, and obviously, the war, you said 1968 was the most extensive or hard part as far as so many battles. What was it like recalling all of these things and all of these moments and things with members, and as well with just your experience while writing this book? Was it really hard, or did you like forget things, or was it easy to remember everything that's happened?
Um, everything, like your own personal experiences. In fact, we talk about that to this day. Like those experiences are vivid. I mean, it's like it happened yesterday. So that 3.5 years that I was in the Marine Corps, I remember it like yesterday in great detail. And then over the rest of my life, like if somebody said to me, gee, what happened to you in 1977? I probably couldn't think of a thing. And, for the next 50 years, if anybody asked me, what happened in year such and such, I probably couldn't remember it. I'd have to try to rack my brain. But if somebody asked me what happened in 1968, it's as vivid as yesterday. And that's true with the other members too. So I guess to kind of answer your question, it's interviewing everybody. It was interesting because we were getting answers to things that we didn't know about. Again, we were all, I'm pulling together the personal experiences of all these different people, including myself. But we didn't know what the bigger picture was. You just took orders and did what you were told to do. So for the book, I had to then research, into the military records to find out what the bigger picture was. Like, what was going on, like during the Battle of Way City, what was the bigger picture? Well, it's same with Quezon. Well, in the book, people get to read about it. So they're reading about what's happening. They get to see the whole picture, not just a little piecemeal part, like saw it from our own perspective.
And so you write that not all of them came home, and those who did face lifelong challenges. How did you approach telling, those parts of the deeply personal and emotional stories of these
Well,
individuals?
actually, it's a very good point you're making. And I should make sure everybody knows this. That book would not even exist today if it wasn't for all the people that I interviewed that were willing to share their deeply personal experiences. And we're talking about combat experiences after the war, what went on behind closed doors. It took a great amount of courage for them to let me write about what happened to them. And I think they did it because they knew it would benefit other people. So I'm glad you brought that up anyhow. So if it wasn't for all those people, there wouldn't be any book. They had to tell me that. So
yeah.
Okay.
And so how have the members of the Twins Platoon stayed connected over the years, and what legacy do they share today?
Well, that's another good point. Over half the members have never been located, and they may not even know that they've been written about. But in the legacy of the Twins Platoon, there's a picture of every member of the Twins Platoon is in there. So, and it's in the beginning of the book. People can, like, if they go to Amazon and do the sample read, they can open up the book and see all the pictures or graduation.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that as the book gets out there, as more and more people are reading it, they may look at these pictures and go, gee, that's my uncle, or
Oh my
it's
goodness.
the neighbor down the
Imagine.
street. And then when they go and say, hey, I saw your picture in the book. Well, what
Uh-huh.
book, you know?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm kind of looking forward to that, because my guess is that, well, some of them may have passed away by now, but I think a lot of them still could be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be willing to bet that they still have not told their families what they experienced and what they went through in any kind of detail. And this book will tell their story for them. So they'll actually um, get the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if, a member looked up just Twins Platoon on Google and your book came up and they found their picture in your book? Oh my gosh, that would be so amazing. Has anyone reached out to you since your book has been published that has surprised you? Maybe
Well,
not a member specifically, but just, in general.
periodically, this is after the first book came out. I would
Yeah, right.
periodically hear from other members that I hadn't located.
Oh, wow.
Um, and some of the stories are actually kind of funny. I can tell you two real quick.
Yeah.
One of them, Wayne Hansen, he was on a construction job, and one of the workers said to him, gee, do you read books? And yeah, he reads books. He said, well, if you want to read a good book, read the Twins Platoon. Have you ever heard of it? And he was just shocked. He said, heard of it? He said, I was in it.
Oh my gosh.
And
Wow.
and so he had to run and of course get the book. And um, I had another fellow, and his daughter, he was taking his daughter to enroll in college, and they walked by the ROTC building, and she said, Dad, you were in the military, right? And he said, yeah, I was in the Marines. And he had told her a little bit about boot camp, how rough it was. And he said, somebody should write a book about it. And she just laughed and said, oh, Dad, you're funny. And then she went to register, and he went into the bookstore, and there was the book, The Twins Platoon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so he bought it, and then he come running out with it, and he said to his daughter, they did write a book about it. They did write a book about
That's crazy.
it.
That's amazing.
Now, on the flip side, which isn't so funny, is after the first book came out, I would hear from other members and hear what happened to them.
Hmm.
And the first book came out in 2006. So now by 2023, there were so many more stories of that I thought these stories need to be told too, because they gave a more complete picture of what happened to the Twins Platoon.
Hmm.
And again, it was some of it is pretty dramatic and pretty rough reading, but
Hmm.
I thought it needed to be in there because again, it gives us a better picture of what went on and
Hmm.
what their experiences were, and for their families, and again, how it affected them for their entire life. So,
Right. Yeah.
so again, that was people contacting me or hearing about the book that weren't written about it originally, but now are in the second book.
Oh.
And yeah, so
And so, what's the journey you wanted readers to have throughout the book? Are there images or pictures that you included?
there's over 200 pictures in the book, actually. Um, and so I put pictures in, well, the way the pictures are, they follow the three different parts. So the part before Vietnam, when you get to the end of that, there's the picture, well, right up front is the picture of all the Twins Platoon members. That's right up in the beginning.
Mm.
And then at the end of the first part are the pictures that pertain to the first part, pictures of like in boot camp. And for example, one of the boot camp pictures is of Dave Selden with a Band-Aid under his eye. And in the book, people get to read, well, why does he have to have a Band-Aid under his eye? So it kind of verifies the stories in the boot camp. And
Mhm.
then at Vietnam, again, at the end of that section are all the pictures from the Vietnam part of the book. And then in the last part of the book, again, are a bunch of pictures that pertain to what I write about in the last part of the book. So to answer your question, there's a lot of pictures in the book.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when did you start with the second book? When did you start writing the second book? And because it was published this year, but what's
Yep.
the timeline of that this
Yep. It took a year to do the second book. So I started it it was June of 24 and about June of 24. It took 12 months to do it.
Okay.
It was a lot faster this time because of all the changes in technology compared to the first book. You have the internet, you have cell phones, you have all kinds of different ways of getting information and reaching people much, much quicker than it was back in 1990.
Yeah. And so what makes this book different from other books about Vietnam?
What it does, again, it's not just one person's story. I think a lot of books, they'll have a person's story in there, or it might be like one battle. And so if you have somebody that's trying to find out, more about the Vietnam War, they're just getting just a little, like one piece in a gigantic puzzle, where this book, it covers the entire period of time, actually from the beginning of the war to the end of the war. And it's all these different people's stories. And like I say, it involves all branches of service just because of the way it is. There's some really good stories in there about the Navy, the Air Force, Army, stories in there. Like I think one Army fellow named Pruden, he got the Medal of Honor. That story's in there. Navy. There's just, so even though it's a book about the Marines, when people read it, I think it's the story of every Vietnam veteran actually and their families when they read it. I think they can all relate to it. And in fact, the book reviews from the first book and even the second kind of confirm that. It's just like, it's just way more than about the Twins Platoon. When people read it, it's a story about all the people that served in Vietnam. I think represents all their stories. So, yeah.
And do you have a favorite part of your book that you wrote, or is there a section that you really are proud of?
Well, no, there's not a favorite right there. They're all, to me, very dramatic and yeah, they're very moving stories. And yeah, one isn't better than the other. They're just all so different and unique. And that's perhaps another thing that I really think is interesting about the book, because if somebody reads about, let's say, Chuck Ennis, his story is incredible, totally different than, let's say, Skip Schmidt or Kenny Goodman. And you read about them and their families and what they went through. They're all different and they're all moving. And I think it doesn't take much to realize, that's mirrored in many other households throughout the country of what their experiences were. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so what was it, what was the feeling you had about writing a book for the first time?
I don't know about the feeling. I can maybe share some things that as I was writing it, it was pretty tough. It was tough on the family, and because I would go into my little area, my little den, close the door, and then I'd be researching and doing the interviews. And the more I found out about what was happening to the people and their families, it just tore you up. I mean, it was like there's some pretty heart-wrenching stuff in there. And so that would happen. And even in the second book, what I found, which was kind of interesting, I think, was some of the fellows that I wrote about, of course, are deceased now, so I couldn't interview them in person. But I interviewed their families, and I dug up the medical record, the military records, and as I put their stories together, and I had their pictures, and by the time I got done writing about them, God, I felt like they were, some of my best friends, even though I
Mhm.
never talked to them. And I'm hoping too that I think when the people read it, when they get done, they're going to go away feeling like, geez, I know that person. I know that family. I mean, because there's a lot of personal stuff in there. Like I say,
Mhm.
they talked about things that went on behind closed doors, what they experienced, what their feelings were.
Mhm.
By the time you're done, I think you almost feel like you'll know
Yeah.
these people. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Did you have a difficult part of your writing process at all?
I would say the most difficult part would be earlier, especially in the first book, was the time lag. Again, like I'd have to fill out forms and send them into the mail to, like, let's say the government to get a combat action report or something. And
Mm.
you might have to wait 6 months before you would get an answer.
Oh, wow.
And just to show people how times have changed, when we were overseas in Vietnam, there was no cell phones, no texts, nothing. So to communicate with your loved ones, you had to write a letter.
Mm.
So if you wrote a letter, it took about 2 weeks before they actually got the letter.
Mhm.
And then when they respond to the letter, it took almost another 2 weeks by the time you got the letter back from them. So you can imagine how awkward that was because,
Mhm.
you're running a month behind.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on
Yeah.
every day,
Meantime.
and it's a month before you've completed the communication cycle.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about your book's endorsements and you have some, top generals that have been a part of this book and its success?
Yeah, that's rewarding beyond words. When I
Mhm.
was in the Marine Corps, and this is true of most of us, we were enlisted men. I don't think 99% of us ever even saw a general. They're at the top of the ranks, or at the highest ranks. So to have four generals, an Army general, three Marine Corps generals, one being the Commandant of the Marine Corps, former Commandant,
Oh.
is just, um, it's just incredible. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get over the thrill of that, actually. That's just something else. And probably the most important part about that is it pretty much lets everybody know that the book it's very accurate,
Mhm.
very realistic. And I think that's why, the historical societies and, the Marine Corps Museum and these different organizations are adding the books to their collection because
Wow.
it's very
Jet. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
factual. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did that come about? How did the generals become involved in your book and endorsing your
Sure.
book?
Well, two of them, a General Weiss, which, by the way, he was a general that started as a private E1 in the Marine Corps, and he worked his way up all the way to being brigadier general. But how he got involved was when I was writing about Wallace Skip Schmidt. Um, one of the battles that Skip was in was the Battle of Dido, which is a historic Marine Corps battle. And when I was verifying and making sure all the information was correct, I had tracked down. At that time, he was a lieutenant colonel. He was the battalion commander, and so I had tracked him down to see if he would read the manuscript and make sure everything I had in there was militarily correct, which
Mm-hmm.
he did do. So that's how how he became aware of the book. And then also that battle ended up involving another Marine Corps unit um, that ended up with the commander in that one became a major general, and that was Major General Livingston, and he received the Medal of Honor in the Battle of Dido.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he was involved with, verifying the accuracy of everything, and so that's how he became aware of the book. And then the Commandant of the Marine Corps, um, I thought how nice it would be to have, endorsement by the Commandant of the Marine Corps. So when I looked on the internet to see who the Commandant of the Marine Corps was a General Berger. And it turned out after the first book had been published in 2006, I got invited by the Marine Corps Coordinating Council to a meeting that he was attending. They were going to give him, he was a general at that time, the Twins Platoon book as a gift. And so they invited me to do it and give him the book. And at that meeting, there were Marines there from all wars at that time, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. They all signed the book for him. And fast forward now to 2024, and I saw, my Lord, he became the Commandant of the Marine Corps. So with some help, I reached back to the coordinating council, and just as luck would have it, somebody still had a way for me to contact him and reach out to him to see if he would read the book and endorse it, which he did do.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, and then I had a friend from church I was telling about the book, and then it turned out he knew an Army general that he had worked with. And I said, I wonder if he would read the book. And so I reached out to him, and he did. And he liked it and endorsed it. So,
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that your book has been included or put into several historical societies, and it's been put into the Marine Corps Command Museum's permanent collection.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that and how that came to existence as well?
Yeah, when I was working on the legacy of the Twins Platoon, I wanted to put in the pictures in boot camp of the actual boot camp pictures out of our graduation books. And, to put pictures in a book, you need to get the rights and permissions to make sure everything is legally correct. And so I contacted the museum in San Diego, and there was a lady there, and she helped me find out on those pictures how I could get the permissions to put them in the book. So after the book came out, then I just reached back to contact the museum, see if they'd be interested in a copy of the book for the museum. And then that's when they told me it's a pretty rigorous process. There's just over 2 million new books published every year in the United States.
Yeah.
And, books are like a snowflake in a blizzard. So, and I'd run into, so they said, well, you can send it, but no guarantees that they're going to put it in there because there's just so many books. So, it was months later, I got that official letter that the committee had reviewed the book and wanted to make it a part of their permanent collection. So
wow,
that was huge.
So cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad you went for it and just, to see what happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've ran into that too. Like there's now a 2nd Battalion, 4th Marine, their association just put the book on their recommended book list.
Oh, wow.
And these days it's, anybody, any author can get a book anywhere listed. That's huge because there are just so many books out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just is. So
wow. Yeah. How does that feel to have your book recognized in so many different ways?
it really feels good, but what makes me feel good about it is that people, I get the reward is knowing that people are going to read about what these members and their families went through. And I've already, it was the first book and the second book was the same. I get letters and stuff from family members and people that, they're so appreciative that they now know what maybe happened to their father or their relatives. I'll get a letter where they say, thank you for writing the book. I knew my dad was in Vietnam. I knew he got wounded. I knew he was in the battle, but he never really told us what happened. And in the book, now they get to read in great detail what he went through. And that's the exciting part is the more the people hear about the book, the more they read it. My reward is that these people are being recognized for their service and their sacrifice, and that's what's really rewarding.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's a good conversation piece as well. Like you mentioned, even if they have a family member that wasn't a member of the Twins Platoon, they might have a member that was in, Vietnam
yeah,
War, and that can, spark a conversation about learning more about their experience. Because a lot of individuals, like my grandpa, was in the Vietnam War as well, and he doesn't really talk about his
yeah,
experience.
yeah.
So, this is kind of a way to introduce that maybe and, get your member or your family to talk more about their
Hmm.
experience.
You need to give him a book as a
I
gift.
will. I will. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about that. I want him to watch the interview and also, yeah, I definitely want to give him a book. I will.
Hmm. I've heard too from, these are the servicemen that served in Vietnam, where a lot of them, I've got correspondence where, again, they thank me for writing the book because they do give it to their families. Because again, it's just, and I think when people read the book, they'll understand why they don't talk about it. It's just,
Right, yeah.
it's too hard. They're just, and they're like, where do you begin? There's so many aspects to what they went through.
Hmm.
They just throw their hands up in the air. It's like, I don't even know where to begin. So they don't even try.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine how
Yeah,
tough that could be. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Um, So I do want to mention that behind you is actually the cover of your book, right? Can you walk
yeah.
us through that and tell us more about it?
Yeah, that's 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines at the Battle of, well, it's not at the Battle of Dido, but it's just prior to that. And in the lower left hand, it would be the left hand corner of the book, there's a fellow raising up that has a grenade launcher. And we're pretty darn sure that's Skip Schmidt. His gunnery sergeant provided me the picture years ago, like
Oh,
about 1997 or 98. And anyhow, he gave me the photo and it looks like Skip, but it's not high definition, so you can't be 100% sure. But what is for sure is these are the guys I'm writing about in action. And when you look at the picture, like a good digital one, it's kind of chilling because you can actually see they're under fire and how they're looking at each other and they're starting to advance forward on the enemy.
hmm.
And the way you can see how they're communicating back and forth just visually. And it's,
Yeah.
to
Wow.
me,
Very powerful.
yeah, it's a chilling picture, but it's the
It's
real
the real
thing.
deal. Wow. Yeah.
So,
And so what advice would you give to a writer working on their first book? Do you have any advice?
um, yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think they'll know in their heart if their story needs to be told,
Mm-hmm.
and that will be their driving force. Um, and to just, I know, like in my case, what I found was, and I don't know if it has to do with it being a calling or not, but I always ended up with everything I needed
Mm-hmm.
to the point it was almost shocking, but it was like, um, it was almost like it was meant to be that the story was meant to be told. And maybe for other writers, it's the same thing. I think this is for nonfiction I'm talking about. I think people that write nonfiction books, they usually have a story that's pretty deeply personal to themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
that there's a reason that it should be told. And I think that'll be their driving force to just hang in there and follow your heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that reminds me, you mentioned earlier that you had the idea for the book and, it was weighing on you to write it and then you finally like, no, this needs to be, I need to start on this.
yeah,
I bet
yeah,
a lot of writers definitely relate to that. It's just something they can't get out of their head unless they, write it down.
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, I just have one last question for you. So in your book, there's a lot of different themes like, like sacrifice and resilience. What message do you hope readers and especially younger generations take away from the story?
well, I think, and this I found interesting too. There seems to be parts of our history where some people, they know a lot about the Vietnam War, and then there's, other people, like even already when I've been out on book signings and stuff, when young people come, I'll say, gee, what did you learn, or what do you know about the Vietnam War? And some of them will know a lot. Some will say, I don't know anything about the Vietnam War. So um, I'm really excited to think if somebody out there doesn't know much about the Vietnam War, I think this is the book for them, because it's going to give them the complete picture of what that war was all about and how it affected our country and their people.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to mention today? Do you have a website or anything that readers can find you at
Yeah,
or reach you at?
yeah. There's actually the new website that's out there right now, and it's almost done, but there'll be more added to it.
Okay.
It's www.thelegacyofthetwinsplatoon.com.
Okay.
So if you go to that website, it'll list like the events, it'll have some pictures. There's also a link on there at the top to Facebook. So I've been trying to put stuff on Facebook that's related to the book.
Mhm.
There's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening, and um, more than I can go into detail now. But yeah, if they go to the website, or if they just Google the legacy of the Twins Platoon, a lot of stuff will come up, because it probably because the book involves so many people that it almost is like it has this ripple effect. Excuse me, where one person will read about it, and then that develops into some kind of an event or story, and it
Yeah.
just keeps spiraling in all different directions. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Nice.
so
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me today. I think your book is, a great book and has some very, brave individuals and incredible stories. And I
yeah,
thank you for writing it and preserving it for all to learn from.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for being here.
My
And to you out there, if you liked Chris's book and want to pick it up for yourself, or if you have someone in mind that you would like to give it to, then head to iuniverse.com's website to purchase it. And also, you can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.